Hello, my name is John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from the capital of Northern BC, Prince George. Beautiful day in Prince George. It's the 14th of October, and look outside, it's just like spring, well, nearly. And I think next week we may get some wintry weather, but so far so good. Special day for me today. It's a special guest. Her name is Christine Midgley.
Yeah, how are you doing?
Hi, Christine. Nice to see you again.
You know, I think it's funny that you said that it's October right now, because as an Ontario girl, this is not what I thought Northern BC October would look like.
No, we didn't either up to until it happens, because a lot of times there's already snow here.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, you're from Ontario originally. Tell me a little bit about your background there.
Yeah, well, I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary in Prince George. It'll be November 1st will be the day that I left Ontario. But yeah, no, I come from the TV production industry in Toronto.
Toronto?
Yeah.
Big city.
Well, it's funny because I lived in Toronto for 3 years before moving here.
Yeah.
But my hometown is Brantford, Homo and Gretzky.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to Prince George.
Did you know him, Gretzky?
No, but I knew Walt.
Yeah.
Walter
was his dad, right?
Walter
he passed away,
incredible.
right? Did he?
He did. It was funny when that happened, because I kind of had two groups of friends where I think he was everybody's hockey dad.
Yeah.
So I had friends all across Canada sharing their memories of him, kind of from a distance.
Yeah.
But then I had my friends from Brantford where we all actually knew him, and I mean, I interacted with him.
Quite an amazing individual, right?
Wonderful.
Yeah, he brought him to where he came to. His son, right, as a, number one hockey player in the world.
Yeah, well, it was just funny because, I mean, even right up to the end, you would have kids who would go up to see Walt, and they would always want to say, oh, well, do you have anything? Do you have it? He would always be carrying, like, little signed postcards and anything he could hand out to the kids, because he just wanted to be that champion of the community.
Yeah. So you were born in
Brantford, yeah.
In Brantford, and then you got your schooling in Brantford.
Okay, so school was a little bit of an interesting thing for me. I actually I stayed back an extra year in high school because there was a media program that I wanted to do. So I did that, and then came time for university, and I threw it all out the window. I said, no, I'm going to go to university for vocal music. And
wow.
Yeah, so I actually went to St. Catharines, Ontario at Brock University, and they had me go into vocal music, and I was singing Italian and Latin and German, and I hated it. So after that first year, I was like, okay, let's take a look again, and you love your media stuff. Let's go back to that. So
what brought you to music so much? Were you thinking that it would be, was it classic then, or what kind of music was it? Yeah,
so definitely the curriculum was very classical music, and I don't think that I was ready for that. I was trained as a classical piano player. Okay. I played piano growing up, and then I've just kind of always sung on my own. Yeah.
And so you did that. Then what did you do then? You went to the...
So I stayed at the same university, but I switched into the media and communications program. And then following that time, I actually went to Mohawk College.
Okay.
And Mohawk College is in Hamilton. And I think that I learned more in my first year at college than I learned the entire time at university.
Why?
You know what? I had incredible instructors, and they were people who had real industry experiences.
That's the key, right?
Yeah, well, it is. And I had one instructor in particular who I'm still very close with, and he was not everybody's favorite because he was very hard. He was very, very difficult to please, but he was somebody that I was like, I'm going to impress him. Like, let's show them what I can do, because I hadn't really actively applied myself for a long time. And it was funny because putting that effort in, the professors, when they had job opportunities come up, they thought of me. So I was actually working in the TV industry my second year of school.
You see, in the time that I've known you and seen you, you interviewed me once or twice, I forget now, but you come across to me as a natural individual in that particular line of work, as a communicator, and all of that comes natural to you.
Not at all. So this is funny. I am a huge introvert, and a lot of people don't realize that because I can turn it on. I mean, if anybody had come to the Kodiaks games, I was sweating through that because I could see everybody. Whereas we're in somewhere like this, it's you and I and there's cameras, but it's having a conversation with a friend. And I've always loved telling stories. I've always loved connecting with people.
Right.
But doing that on a large scale where people can see, no, it scares the crap out of me.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So why?
Yeah, it comes back to that storytelling thing. I think, so for me...
Are you a storyteller then?
Yeah, I'm a storyteller, and I also want to make sure people feel seen. I think that's a big thing for me. Make sure that people feel seen.
Yeah.
For me, I was bullied horribly in my childhood, and it led to a lot of long-term issues that I still deal with to today.
Can you say that once more? I didn't find...
Yeah, no, I was bullied as a child for...
Oh, bullied?
Horribly
Why?
bullied. Oh, so I was the smart kid. I had short hair, glasses, braces. I didn't fit the cookie cutter mold that they had. And for a long time, that really affected my self-worth. And in all honesty, to this day, it still does. But taking that experience, something I've always prioritized moving forward is that I want to include people. I want people to feel seen and feel valued. And through my job, and I've had the opportunity to tell people stories and make sure that the people are seen for their passions, for the work that they're doing. And that's kind of the heart of it there.
Yeah, I think so. It's so unique that you are so honest about it.
Yeah.
Because if we watch you, and as I watch you, I've seen you on CKPG, the day show there, and you are so professional and so knowledgeable, and you come across so easy.
Thank you.
That, yeah, you do, And now I have to tell you something else.
Yeah.
The same applies to me, but applies to you in
Really?
a way that I'm really, most people that know me, I'm both. I can be an extrovert, but I'm also an introvert, a bit of a loner a lot of times. And then in my case, in a different way than you, but I was born in 1940 in northern...
A few years before me. Just a couple years, right?
In northeastern Holland.
Yes.
And during the war years, so when we were liberated by the Canadians, April the 12th, 1945, we went through a very, very difficult time as my mother had 3 children. I was the youngest, born in November the 1st, and then...
Oh, you're a November baby too. I'm a November baby.
I like it.
Yeah, okay, okay.
And my sister was 1 year old and my brother 2 years old, and the 3 of us, together with my mother, survived through the war, and then, in particular, the winter 1944 to 45 were extremely cold and difficult, and we saw far more than we should have. And it was until much later in life that I got counseling for the inner child and for PTSD.
Well, that's the thing. These experiences that you have, they do stay with you, and you need to deal with them. You can't just push them down, because people have asked me, oh, well, would I have done things differently in the past? And absolutely not, because of those experiences, I am who I am today. Yeah. And that took a long time for me to kind of come to that realization, as simple as that concept may seem.
Did you do that on your own, or like in my case, I probably was in my late 50s when, because of issues that we had in our relationship, we're still together and all of that kind of stuff, but talking to the counselor, he suggested to us that he wanted to talk to me on my own about the inner child, and and that's then what we agreed between my now wife and him, that's what I would do, and it was quite a very emotional experience.
Now, had you ever talked about that with somebody before in that capacity?
No, never.
It's tough.
Yeah,
but it changes things.
It was an amazing experience because that little kid was still there, and it was unresolved, and quite an experience. And then I'm a bit of a basket case, because then add to that PTSD, and then obviously the other thing that you may already know. I'm kind of looking out for my book here.
I think it's something about ADHD somewhere. I think it's right behind me here.
Yeah. Is it?
It is. It's over here.
That's what it is.
See, I know what's going on. I got you.
Yeah. So then I was 57 when I picked up a book, and I opened the book and said, "Oh my God, that's me."
Yeah.
You know, and well, you know the story. So and then you know, then how do you become a person that loves to communicate, loves to be around people, and then at the same time be the opposite? Kind of probably up to the time that I was, even when I already was here in Canada. I came in 1965. I was 24 years old, and then built a mill. And even then, I thought I was a failure. Yeah. And I had failed in Holland because I failed grade 3, and then I failed grade 7 3 times. And
but it's funny though, because that comes into question of what do you consider success?
Yeah.
Because I think everybody has a different lens of what that looks like to them. So it's really funny to think that you had this business going and you weren't seeing yourself as a success.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Until much later, and then you know, and subsequently I had difficulty interacting with more than 3 people together. I had difficulty to be part of a group like that. I didn't feel had the confidence. And then it was in about 1990. Can you imagine? I was already 50. And then somebody dragged me to a meeting of Toastmasters. And I said, well, I don't want to go. I don't want anybody to ask me any questions. And so I went there, and actually my ex-sister-in-law, and she brought me down there. And then somebody asked me during the meeting, saying, okay, well, you want to tell you a little bit about yourself, John?
That's the hardest question to answer.
I said I'd never go back there again.
See, it's funny because I'm terrible at talking about myself.
Yeah.
And do you find that that's difficult for you too?
Then I did.
Yeah.
Very much so. So I went back the following. I was not going to go back. I went back the following week, and then from there on in, I stayed in it. I did it for 10 years,
wow.
Christine, and it probably was the thing that changed my life. No question about it. For $2 a week, that's about what it cost then.
$2 a week?
For Toastmasters, yeah.
Wow.
And I then got to the highest level in Toastmasters with this thing with Toastmaster. I did a lot of public speaking then, still do, and it changed my life. There is no question about it, and allowed me to accept that you know, I'm okay. You know, so but I still do the same. If they ask me my personality, I'm extrovert, but also an introvert. Yeah. I'm both. You know, I'm comfortable in both areas.
Well, you can be both. I mean, people are complex, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, that then being said, tell me a little bit more about. So you were still in Toronto. Did you get into the media? Yeah.
So that, as I was saying, with my instructors at college. So it was my second year of college, and I had one of my instructors. He's a technical director for a big production company, and he was getting ready for the Canadian Country Music Awards.
Okay.
And he sent out an email to a couple of us and said, "Hey, is there anybody that wants to volunteer?" Only sent it to a few of us, and I was like, well, do you have any paid positions? And immediately I was like, okay, like let's see what I can do. Either way, I was going to do it. I would have gone and I would have volunteered and I would have put my whole heart into it.
Perfect, right?
But I was like, okay, if we can make this something else, why not? And I ended up getting hired to be craft services. So I just went and I was making sure that the snack table was full. That was the job. Yeah. I had huge country music stars coming in, and I didn't like country music.
No.
So I didn't know who any of these people were. So I was like, perfect. I'm not going to fangirl over anybody. I'm going to be at this high-profile event. And then I found out about 4 days after being there that my lifetime idol was the one who was hosting the show. She was Jessie Cruikshank. But she was the whole reason I got into TV. She has been my inspiration, continues to be my inspiration.
Can you imagine it?
I just freaked out.
Right.
It was funny because I went from looking after everything, and I still did, but then I had this internal voice of being like, what do you say? What do you say? Or just hide.
Yeah.
And And I used that time though. I made sure that all of my jobs were done, and then I would go and I would watch her rehearse.
Yeah.
And I would see what her process was like.
Yeah.
And I know they say don't meet your heroes, but it could not have been more opposite from the truth. I mean, she is such a hard worker, and that was so inspirational to me.
Yeah.
And seeing that moving forward, I've had the opportunity to work with her a couple times since, and that just kind of kickstarted everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then so what did happen to your career from that point forward?
Yeah, well, I was lucky. I kept getting called back, and it was funny to me because in school I had a couple friends who made comments of, oh, well, now that I'm doing this diploma, I won't have to get coffee for anybody. I won't have to do that. And my experience was very different. It was, no, you go and get the coffee, you do it with a smile on your face, and you make the connection.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you make the connection, that person will
It's
call you.
all about contacts, right?
It is, and that person will call you for the next job, and that's what happened with me. So I ended up getting called, I can't even remember the order, but I worked on the JUNOS, which are big Canadian, the Canadian Screen Awards, the Amazing Race Canada, and eventually I was working for the Food Network for a year and a half on Big Food Bucket List, and that was kind of the last thing before I made the move out to Prince George.
No, but your career was, you had all these contacts, you were very good at what you were doing. Why would you want to leave? There could nothing in the world could be that special that you wanted to leave.
There was a boy. There's always a boy. This is the problem. No, I, like many people that I have discovered since moving here, I moved for love, and I haven't looked back since, but I was doing a long distance relationship. We didn't actually start dating until after he'd moved out here.
Where did you move? Where did you meet him?
So Ethan and I actually met in Hamilton. We co-hosted a football show together. It was all about Ontario University athletics, and we were focusing on football. And he and I had chemistry right from the get-go.
Yeah.
The problem is that I was throwing myself at him, and he didn't get it.
Yeah.
He completely missed it. So I was trying for months to get his attention and be like, well, let's hang out after the show and let's do this. And he didn't budge. So I gave up. And I said, okay, you know what? Let's go back. He wants to be friends. We'll be friends.
Yeah.
We both had other relationships. We helped each other through them. We were always the person that we would go to when we had problems. And then he was offered a job here in Prince George.
Yeah.
And I remember convincing him to take it.
Yeah.
And again, just as a friend, but I was like, there's huge opportunity here. And
that was not good.
Well,
maybe it was.
I say maybe it accelerated things. I don't know. But yeah, I convinced him to move out here, and I could not make this up if I tried. And everybody tells me that it sounds like a Hallmark movie moment. He asked me to drive him to the airport to move across the country on Valentine's Day. I may or may not have had a boyfriend at the time, but yeah, so I drove him to the airport on Valentine's Day, and as he's moving across the country, after 2.5 years of being my best friend, he confesses his love for me, plants one on me, and moves across the country. I'm like, what do I do with that? So we did the long distance thing for about 2 years after that, and then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it really changed priorities. I mean, I was very excited to be in the industry I was, and I was definitely in a really good spot in the industry, and I could have kept going there had I wanted to, but he was more important. Yeah. And I'd come out to visit Prince George a few times, and in all honesty, I didn't like it when I came to visit. No. But I was so focused on the relationship.
It's not Toronto.
Well, but it didn't need to be Toronto, but I didn't really understand all that there was to offer here yet. Yeah. And I couldn't see myself being here, but I'm like, well, he's here. If he's
What time of year was it?
I came out a couple times. I came out in June, I came out in September, so I came out a few different times. Yeah. But I said, you know what? I can get over that. I like outdoor adventures. Maybe I'll move out there and we'll go down to Kamloops. Yeah. We'll be there for a little and then we'll leave. Yeah. And I got here and I didn't have a job and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And I started working at Lululemon at the mall. Yeah. And I made some great connections there. And all of a sudden I started seeing some of the things you could do outdoors. Yeah. And then I was picked up by the production companies and I made the couple movies that were here. And then I had the opportunity to make my daytime TV show. You did 2 movies here, right? Yeah. Yeah, and then the show came along, and all of a sudden, what a way to get to know Prince George.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to experience so many things for the very first time, and it was all on camera.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, that girl who said, I don't like Prince George, I don't want to live here, she is long gone. I mean, we've been here, as I said, coming up on 2 years for me now. It's about 3.5 for him.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't change it for the world. And
You kind of fell in love with it.
I totally fell in love with it. But it's the people. There are so many incredible people here. And I mean, I'm a nature lover. I love exploring the outdoors, but there are a lot of places that you can explore the outdoors.
You're also into sports quite a bit, right?
Yeah. It's been a while, and I've been dealing with some injuries since I've been here.
Yeah.
But I'm a skier. Yeah. And this has been the hardest thing for me, is I haven't really been
downhill
able to ski.
skiing, or what do you do?
Yeah, downhill. I was a downhill ski racer for most of my life. Yeah, I started skiing when I was 3.
That's far too fast for me.
It was my favorite thing.
Yeah.
Except for I'm so injury prone that my coaches wouldn't let me go in the terrain park, because they're like, well, you're too fast. We need you to get points, so you can't hurt yourself before then. Yeah, but no, it was fun, and that's something that, I mean, I'm hoping that I can do more of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have a ski hill here too, right? Not quite like that, but the other thing that behind us is the new pool.
I'm so excited for the new pool.
You do quite a bit of swimming too, and you've been quite involved in that, right?
Yeah, so I'm very much, aquatics has been a strong part of my background. My parents actually met lifeguarding. That was, I think my parents met when they were like 16. They didn't start dating until they were into their 20s, but because of that, that's always been something that they'd kind of pushed on me a little bit. But I look back to being 16 and my summer job was lifeguarding outdoors. I wouldn't have changed a thing. But I actually was a lifeguard instructor and a first aid instructor, and I used to run a huge outdoor aquatic facility in Ontario. Yeah,
and then you got hired by the radio station here in Prince George, PG Today, and you're very good. When I watch you, that was a whole new show for them, and
we got to build it. We got to build it from the ground up.
Unbelievable, because you had to kind of do all the work behind it, and then present it.
Well, and a lot of people, I think, look at the show and think that there's a huge team behind it. And
that's what I thought. It must be, right?
Yeah, and it was just my co-producer Zach and I, and right from the get-go, I mean, don't get me wrong, we definitely had other people that we could get help from, but it was him and I sitting there in this empty studio figuring out, okay, what do we want to make this?
For 1 hour a day?
So the show itself was on for 45 minutes. Now the format's changed. It's a half hour now.
Right.
Because the show has gone on. Spoiler alert, I did leave. But so we had to figure out what we wanted it to be. And I was really fortunate coming from a really, really big industry where I would never get the chance to build something from scratch.
No.
And I got to go in, say, okay, this is what I want to cover. This is what I want the message to be.
Yeah.
I designed the sets.
Yeah.
And then Zach had to build the sets because I didn't make anything to scale. But he somehow took this Photoshop vision that I made and made it a reality, and then designing the logos and seeing how he brought it to life. And it was a collaborative venture through and through. And
it was so professional the way I thought it. When you interviewed me and the fellow that was with me, and so it was very, very professional.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Tell me some of over the 2 years that you did that, some of the interesting things that happened, because you had to kind of put it together right from how do you make it fit, and how you never quite know, like even for myself doing podcasting, nothing compared to what you're doing, but you never quite know what will happen. And
well, you don't, and that's the thing. I mean, the majority when I was doing it, it was live. It's now moved away from being completely live. But definitely those live segments, we had things that went wrong. I remember Kim from the Makery was there, and I had her on every month. And it was probably the second time she'd been there. And she goes, hey, Christine, I've brought this really, really easy pom-pom craft. And she has all of this yarn. She's like, so easy. We do this with people all the time. You can't screw it up. And she's saying this on live TV. She jinxed me hard. So we're going and we're doing this whole activity, and hers is looking beautiful, and all of a sudden my yarn drops and it gets stuck underneath the kitchen island, and I'm on live TV, and so I end up just dipping down. I was like, okay, just hold on a second, watch Kim, I'm going to be down on the floor. And then I would like pop up and say something, and I couldn't get this yarn out.
Oh my
so
God.
I ended up just throwing it and just being, okay, well, watch her. But things don't work. And it's how you roll with those punches and adapt and laugh at yourself. I don't think I've ever laughed so much at myself in my life, but that's what made it genuine.
And that's exactly what makes it genuine, and that's what made it special, right? So, and then still staying all together rather than getting totally flaccid or whatever you call it.
I mean, looking back on the show, I did a full year of shows because we started on October 12th, and I left just before the long weekend, and to look and say, okay, I've done a year of shows. What did that look like? And within every show, I kind of had a goal of having something that everybody would watch.
5 days a week or how?
Yep, 5 days a week, and I would do 3 segments in each show. Yeah. There would be some other bits and pieces too, but I always wanted to say, okay, I don't expect that, say, John is going to tune in and that he's going to be interested in every single thing on the show. Yeah. But I want to make sure that there's one thing that he'll be interested in. Yeah. So I tried to make a bit more variety. So if we were talking something that was more businessy, well, I wanted to make sure I had something more visual to balance that. Yeah. And looking back at that and thinking about the conversations I was able to have and the experiences I was able to have, I mean, I talk a lot about the laughter and the fun stuff, but we also had some pretty serious conversations. Yeah, well, I remember, having the sexual assault center on. Yeah. That was probably one of my favorite conversations, and we had a very open discussion about sexual assault and what that looks like. And my guest, who's the executive director there, she talked about being a victim of sexual assault, and I said, on live TV, I don't even know what overcame me. I said, hey, me too. Yeah. Yeah. And that wasn't something I ever thought I was going to say out loud, let alone out loud on TV. Exactly. But the show is a safe space to do that. Yeah. And will forever be thankful for having that space to have those messages and have those conversations. Yeah. And
it came across the whole time that you were there as it became a very, very popular show, one of the most popular shows in Prince George that I've known.
Hey, I'll take it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then so you were quite involved with the Kodiaks as well?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So I'm a football girl. It's funny because I know Canada is supposed to be the land of hockey. I am not a hockey fan at all. And that's going to get me in trouble now that my boyfriend is working with the Spruce Kings. Yeah. But I was raised on football. My dad was a high school football coach. Yeah. So some of my earliest memories were going to those high school games, and we're big Cat fans at home, so we're going to CFL games all the time. So when I moved here, I was like, man, there's no football. Yeah. And
now there is.
I was like, now there is, thank goodness. And that was the thing I remember when Craig Briere was talking about starting it up, because he's a good friend. And I was like, please, yes, do this. It's going to be wonderful. Yeah. The community is going to love it. And there was that question for a little bit of, okay, Prince George is a hockey community. Can they embrace the football? Yeah. And I got to say, being able to stand on that track and look at Masich Stadium filled every single home game was so cool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Prince George came
Amazing,
out. It was. And I don't know whether you had a chance to go, but just the environment was just so positive, so uplifting, regardless as to what was happening on the field. And it was awesome. So I'm really hoping we do that again next year. Yeah.
And it will be, right? Yeah. So because the first year in particular, you never quite know, although Craig and the team around him did a fantastic job to get it off the ground. And obviously Prince George is ready for it.
Oh,
the sounds of it. There's no question about that. The other thing that now you are a media communications individual, and I understand you're working at the College of New Caledonia.
Yeah, so I'm just finishing my first week, so it is very, very fresh. I'm still getting my bearings, but definitely talking about loving that storytelling. I think that there are so many stories there. You have so many students from so many different backgrounds, and I'm just looking to continue the work that I've already started. I wasn't ready to leave Prince George yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there is a building that...
Might have your name on it, I think. Just maybe.
The Dennis, Dr. Dennis, is obviously, Johnson is a friend, and I've had him on the podcast, an amazing individual, that has done a fantastic job for the college, and as you well know, the region here in general is, I always call it the capital of Northern BC, but it's all still evolving as we speak, and in the next number of years there will be a lot of industry growth and a lot of other things happening and around the University of Northern British Columbia as well as the College of New Caledonia.
Well, it's incredible having two educational facilities like those, because it really does just feed into the population, into the culture in Prince George. And I mean, the more you put in, the more you're going to get out. And I think people have seen that growth already, and there's room for infinite possibilities there. Yeah.
So when the job became available, but it is an interesting change, not a change you communicate first and foremost, but a change of career from media to something that's also somewhat media, but also learning everything about the College of New Caledonia and all the things around it is interesting.
Yeah, well, I think that it comes back to kind of talking about the kind of person I am. When we talked about kind of that battle of introvert versus extrovert, and I truly am introverted, and I think a lot of the time, as much as, I love talking to people and I love doing this, but sometimes it can be hard to pull that out every single day and put on a happy face, because no matter what's going on in my personal life, in my health life, you need to show up. I need to show up with a smile. And I think towards the end of my time there, I was struggling, and it was more with mental health issues, and it hit a point where I was like, hey, I've got to make a decision, and I need to figure out what the best choice is for me. And it was a hard choice. I love the people. I love the people there, and to know that me walking away didn't mean walking away from Prince George. It didn't mean walking away from telling stories. It was just, you know what, we're going to do this in a different way.
So you talk quite a bit about mental health and ADHD, obviously, and more that is much more in the open now than it used to be. It used to be something like, even for myself, and I was diagnosed for ADHD, I didn't really tell anybody about it. I was somewhat ashamed of it in a way.
Which is too bad, but that's why representation matters. And that's when we talked about including people and making sure that people are seen. Sometimes that means being seen for the stuff you're not proud of too. And to be able to say, you know what, there's somebody on TV who's like me, who's dealing with something that I'm dealing with. It makes a difference. And that's why I've tried to be open when it's come to that stuff. I've had extensive mental health struggles with depression, with anxiety. And for me to keep that in and deal with it myself is one thing, but if I can even make a difference in one person that's listening,
and you will,
then I will.
There's no question about that, right? The same as I did with ADHD, is saying that when I started talking about it more and more, it became quite obvious that the frequency of occurrence much higher than most people ever anticipated, and then I started talking about it more and more, and then the other part about it is that I felt I wrote the book Against All Odds. It took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. Autobiography is difficult because writing books is not easy, although amazingly, with my background, I'm a good writer.
Are you? Yes. So where did your love of writing come from?
Because I'm like you, I'm a storyteller. That's what I do, and that's what I'm good at. That's why I was good at Toastmasters. I'm a storyteller. I had to just unlock it so I didn't become self-confident, and all of a sudden I'm telling a story, and now I have anxiety about what will they think, and what will they say, and what do I, and all this.
It's hard though.
Once I'm past that, then I'm a very good storyteller, and then subsequently a good writer. With an autobiography, you cannot write one. This is my first book, and then say, I'll write another one. There's only one of them. You can only do one of them. But it involves all the other things that you have to do. It's not just writing it, and then now how do you publish it? And how do you print it? What should the paper look like? What should the title look like? And how do you put it together? And all those kind of things. And fortunately, I was able to have a good team around me, and the book, although I say it myself, has been quite popular.
Yeah.
And then I felt I had to write about ADHD, and then make it something unique in terms of, so that somebody that has ADHD can kind of open it anywhere and then say, okay, read that, and then go back someplace else, like is typical for ADHD. And
it's a really unique way that you wrote it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it has become very popular. And in fact, in Europe, we have a podcaster that has 1.5 million viewers.
Oh, wow.
And he has been talking about my book and be getting a lot of responses from them and from Europe.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
And in fact, we were looking at all the cumulative responses that we have to our books and our podcasting combined. We have something like 1.5 million.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Well, it's okay. So this is the funny thing, because like I said, in terms of not necessarily being a public speaker, or I don't see myself as being a public speaker, do you ever forget that you have people watching? Because I had people say that to me all the time. They're like, oh, how can you be afraid of public speaking? You're doing this. But sometimes I'd forget that people were watching until I'd have somebody approach me at the hardware store or at the grocery store. I was like, oh, right. I'm sending messages out here.
Yeah. Yeah, this public speaking for me was initially difficult until I went to Toastmasters, and I felt I got the self-confidence. And now a lot of times it took time. I still have a little bit of anxiety, but you have to have that to be good at what you're doing. And so I feel good about it.
Well, it's funny. I think one of the things that I said to almost every single person who came on my show, and I'm sure I probably said it to you too, or at least through somebody else, people would come on and they'd be nervous all the time. I mean, especially for live TV. And I would always say, you know what? It's two things. First of all, when you start talking about something that you're truly passionate about, those nerves are going to melt away, because that love is going to shine through. And the second piece is, if you're that nervous, it means that you care.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't care,
what's the purpose?
You wouldn't be freaking out inside. So if you can at least understand where that anxiety is coming from and say, you know what, it's coming from a constructive spot, I think that it's a lot easier to deal with.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
And and to me, it's something that is important to talk about some of these issues. And then one of the ones that I've been doing already for the last 10 years around November the 11th, I talked to 2 or 3 or 4 different schools about what I remember about the war since I was there. In particular, the 2 minutes of silence as to why do we do that. Yeah. And so this year I'm talking to one school in Prince George, and then to 2 in Surrey, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And one is on the 9th and the other one's on the 11th, I think, or the 10th or so. And to me, that's very important to keep sharing, my memories with them about what it meant. All of a sudden, the whole world was perfect, and then overnight it all changed. Yeah. And everything that you took for granted wasn't like that anymore. We see the same now in the Ukraine, obviously, very troubling, and but I enjoy that, although it is always somewhat emotional to me too to even talk about it, So, but it's very important to do that.
Well, and that's the thing. I think passing history down, especially, to go and be telling classrooms about it and being able to say, you know what, this was my firsthand experience. Stories live on.
Canadians, you know.
Yeah, but stories live on, right?
Yeah.
And then when we do have history repeating itself in different ways, we can tie back to those stories. And I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your, what you did, the show here at CKPG Today. Are you thinking about, that as part of your career, being in the media and doing more of that?
Yeah, so I'm kind of at this like in-between stage where I'm not really sure what the future holds. I'm really, really excited to see what I can do at CNC. But I also think that I'm going to have a little bit of time to do things on the side now. So I'm starting to figure out what that's going to look like. So I'm not...
You're a good speaker. You have confidence. Obviously, you present well.
Well, I'm definitely... I'm not going anywhere yet. So I've had a few people approach me around PG about doing a few things. So I've got some things up my sleeves.
You would be a good podcaster.
You know what? It's funny. Danny from North Soul Studios, she said the exact same thing, and she's been going at me about that too. Yeah. But I don't know. I'll have to get tips from you. You have to tell me how it's done. Because
like this.
I've never done podcasting before.
No, well, you have not called it podcasting, but
yeah.
basically is what I'm doing, you should be doing, and you would be totally comfortable with it because you anticipate somebody coming into your show that you were doing, and you don't fully understand the individual other than doing your homework, but along the way you will talk about topics that bring you to other topics, and then it becomes very, very interesting.
Yeah. But you do the homework, right? I think the homework was the key piece of that. I think the more prepared you are going in, I think that serves you very well.
But I didn't do much homework on you because we didn't have much homework other than I know you were from Ontario. I know that you like swimming, and I didn't know where you were working until I was standing outside by pure coincidence because we called and said you just left CNC.
Yeah.
So,
you're like, oh, and then the pieces are all clicking together. But it's funny because I like to think of myself as an open book. I'm like, I'm hugely obsessed with plants and my dog, and that's pretty much about it. But
tell me about your dog.
I'm obsessed with my dog.
Yeah.
So I was never...
What is it?
So he is a black lab. He's more of a salt and pepper lab these days, though. He's 8.5.
Yeah.
But he's my world. It's funny though, because he was Ethan's dog. And this was the funny thing, because I met them both in Hamilton, and I would go over to visit Ethan, but I would just be hanging out with Tucker. I'd be hanging out with the dog.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I remember him saying like, oh, well, you know what? Girls usually ignore him. And I was like, well, I'm here to visit the dog. I'm not here to visit you. So over there, mister. But it was funny because as we established our relationship, Tucker has turned into a little bit of a mama's boy, and I've kind of stolen the dog.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I don't really feel guilty for.
Yeah.
Sometimes Ethan gets upset, and I was like, you know what? Think of it this way: you both fell in love with me, and that's okay.
That's okay.
I'm like, that's how you know it was meant to be.
Yeah.
But so no, I've spent a lot of time doing that. But it's funny that you talk about, in terms of doing history and research and stuff, there's only so much that's out there. So I've got a question for you, because I had a CEO that I worked for once, and at a Christmas party, he asked all of us to go around and recount our most terrible job experience. And I twisted it on my head a little bit, and I went most unique. So I'm gonna ask you, what was either your worst job experience, like worst first job kind of a thing, or your most unique job experience?
For me?
Yeah, for you.
Probably the worst one was that the first job I got in Canada was piling lumber, or clean-up man, and I had looked for that particular job. I had no money really, and they promised me this job, and I was working there the first week, and they laid me off.
No.
Yeah, not me, but they laid off a whole bunch of guys.
So it was just in and out really fast.
No, I was not accepting it. I said, you cannot lay me off. I could barely speak. I couldn't speak the language. I didn't.
But you knew no. You're like, this is not happening.
No, this is not happening. And they kept me on.
Really?
And then within a year and a half, I was superintendent of one of the biggest mills in Prince George.
But I think that is such a cool story, though, because it really, I mean, sometimes you have to buckle down. Sometimes you have to say, you know what, no, I'm here. I'm going to work my butt off.
I'm not going to be laid off. That was the first time ever in my life that happened to me. And all the other jobs that I had before, I was all quite successful for obvious reason. Here I was just, who is this guy? You know?
Okay, so you haven't had any like really weird jobs.
Well, I've had jobs. I was a bartender of a
I was a bartender for a long time.
in Watson Lake.
Okay.
And a cabaret that I owned in a motel, 150 seat bar, you know, and there was one year I had 2 knives pulled on me, 2 guns, and one 30-06. And I gave it all away for $1 because I know I would not survive. And that was when my first daughter was born. I knew I'd never give up. Right, but then I had to give it all away. I mean,
that's not giving up, right?
I had to give it. I could not sell it because nobody wanted to buy it, so I gave it all away for $1. Yeah.
But it was looking at your priorities, right?
No.
Yeah.
I knew I had to do that. Looking back on it was the right thing to do.
Okay, well, I say my weird job is much weirder than yours. I feel like yours are normal jobs. I bet you're not going to hear this from many people. I was a Disney princess for hire.
You what?
I was a Disney princess for hire.
My God, what did that mean?
I would go to birthday parties or sometimes restaurants and things, and I would be one of the Disney princesses, and I would talk to all the kids, I would sing, I would dress up, and I did that for a couple of years. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people would never know that that's even a thing, but it exists.
Yeah.
Is there a company that does that here? I don't know.
But you were good at it, likely, right? And then how would you advertise that? You would be in the newspaper?
Oh, I was just working for a company. They were like, hey, you know what? You're Belle today. You go where you're going. Oh, you're Ariel. You're going to go that way.
Yeah.
And then Elsa came out, and I was all about Frozen.
Yeah.
It was like me and all the 4-year-olds. Just Frozen was the best.
Was that the best job you ever had? What is the best job you ever had?
Best job I ever had. You know what? I've been fortunate to have a lot of really, really good jobs. I mean, I regularly go back to my time lifeguarding. I mean, I worked in aquatics starting when I was 12 because I kind of was in a point before they really recorded all of, like the documents. But I think more recently, the last job that I had in Toronto, working on Big Food Bucket List, I had such an incredible team to work with. Yeah. It was in the office, me and 5 other women, and my supervisor, my goodness, she, to this day, best boss I've ever had. Yeah. Totally incredible. Scared the life out of me if I was going to make a mistake. But it was because I respected her so much. And she was the person who would be there and would champion you. I mean, she still does to this day. She's somebody that I can bounce ideas off, and she's now climbed the ladder even more, and she's the executive producer at a really big company in Toronto now. But yeah, I look at that and I look at that experience and just seeing the way ideas were bounced back and forth and the respect and just the culture that existed there. Yeah. Second to none.
What is your strongest personality type? What makes you so successful in most of the things that you do?
I don't know. I just keep trying. I think I'm relentless.
Is it your passion? Because that comes out in volumes to me. That's what they always say to me. I get very excited about life. You know, like in the morning when I get up, usually get up at 5:30. I always make my bed. Mm-hmm. Now I always think I'm late, and seldom that I get down. And I always find a way of seeing the cup is always half full. If there's a problem to solve it, and then that's what I do. That's what I've done. I started working when I was 14. I'm nearly 82 now, so I've been doing this for 68 years.
See, and I think I'm almost the opposite because, like I said, I do struggle with these mental illnesses that I try not to put as the forefront. And by nature, depression, like I've got some really dark days. And sometimes putting that best foot forward, you have to fake it. Because I know that if I give in to that black hole and I sink into the couch for a week, like that's not going to help me. That's not going to help anybody. No. And if I can try to fake it for a little bit, eventually me faking it becomes real. And that doesn't mean that I'm not also dealing with whatever emotions are coming with that. But sometimes it is just saying, you know what, I'm going to pick up, do my best, acknowledge the small victories,
Right.
and then you just keep going. And
Yeah.
I'm, like I said, I want to put out good in the world, and that's a driving force for me. I want to make people happy.
Yeah.
Put
Yeah.
smile. If I can put a smile on one person's face in a day,
Yeah.
I'm set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you kind of look around what I'm hearing from you, you've been very good at the things that you've done. You like to sing, but you didn't like Italian and the opera.
English is good. I'm
You
a
like
musical
country
theater.
music?
No.
No, because I thought then you got involved with country music.
Yeah.
And
No, I'm just sneaky. I like crept in the back door, but no, musical theater. Musical theater has always been my passion.
Yeah.
I've always been a big theater kid because my dad, as I said, he was a high school football coach, but as
Yeah.
a teacher, he was the drama and English teacher.
Yeah.
So my love of theater comes from him.
Do they still live in Ontario, your parents?
Both mine and Ethan's families are all in Ontario. We're just we're by ourselves out
How
here.
many siblings you have?
I've just got one younger brother.
What's his name?
His name is Jeffrey, and it's funny because growing up, I think we were either the best of friends or absolutely at each other's necks.
Yeah.
But thankfully, as we've grown older, it just becomes best friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm really fortunate. I've got a really good support system there.
So, anything else that comes to mind that you like to talk about?
I don't know. You know what? I meant to ask you this earlier because we talked about the fact that I came out here for love, which is funny because, like I said, he came out here on like a 1-year plan, and now 3, 4, however many years later, he's still here, and I'm now here. So I've done some crazy things for love. I moved across the country. What is the craziest thing that you have ever done for love? Because I think you talk about business all the time, so I figured to put you on the spot a little here.
No, you don't. Actually, it's a good question. At one point, business was so tough, and I was struggling with all kinds of things in business mainly, and I started to drink more than was good for me, and then I smoked a little pipe. I used to smoke cigarettes way back then. I know.
Gross.
And then I thought, to get out of the smoking, I started smoking a little pipe, European pipe, not good either. And then I was on Xanax, and Xanax, not good for you.
Yeah.
So then my girlfriend, I had been with her already for quite a number of years, and she dumped me.
Oh no.
Yeah. And I'm married to her now 40 years, but
So it worked out. It worked out okay.
She dumped me, and it broke my heart, and I stopped drinking, smoking, and using Xanax all in 1 week.
Oh my goodness.
And
that had
even
to
then
take
it
toll
took
on
a
your
couple
body.
of months before we got back together again. But what was the hardest thing to get rid of? Xanax. But since the time I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I don't use Xanax, so.
See, I don't know if that's a crazy thing to do for love. I think that's a pretty admirable thing to tackle your vices.
Yeah. Yeah, but, it was a wake-up call. That's big time.
But, happily ever after.
Happy ever after. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Christine, love to have you, and thanks for being my podcast
Yes,
guest.
thank you for having me, and here's to many more years of success in Prince George.